Good morning. I'm Matthew Vollmer. I'm a professor of English at Virginia Tech. I direct the MFA program in creative writing and also the undergraduate program in creative writing. And I was asked to talk about how I've been using AI. And so I created this presentation with the help of Claude and ChatGPT, as well as Midjourney. And what I'll cover in this presentation includes a brief intro, how to streamline tasks and tame the onerous. We want to address resistance to AI, how it can enhance pedagogy, and supercharge creative scholarship and storytelling. Just briefly, whenever I introduce or start talking about LLMs, I like to talk about how they work or how I understand that they work, which my understanding is admittedly limited. But large language models, like those developed by OpenAI and Anthropic, use GPT, or generative pre-trained transformer technology, to generate text-based responses. LLMs are trained on massive amounts of text from the internet to learn language patterns. They don't memorize specific documents, but understand general structures and concepts. After pre-training, they're improved using carefully selected examples to refine accuracy and ensure high-quality responses. Some versions can access live tools like web browsing for up-to-date knowledge or interact with plugins for specialized tasks. Newer LLMs may retain details across sessions, enabling personalized interactions. Memory is stored and managed transparently, and users can update or clear it. LLMs predict the next word in a sequence based on the context of the input, using a transformer neural network to recognize patterns and relationships in language. This allows them to create coherent, context-aware, and dynamic responses. In other words, an LLM is like a supercharged librarian with amnesia. They've read every book in the library and can tell you all about any topic, weaving together brilliant insights from memory, but they don't remember where they got the information, can't cite specific sources for the most part, and sometimes make up plausible-sounding answers to fill in the gaps. Ask them the right questions, and they'll impress you, but you probably won't want them writing or hallucinating your bibliography. So one of the essential functions that I've used LLMs for in the past year is to streamline tasks and tame the quote-unquote onerous. I've used LLMs to draft tricky emails, answer program queries, draft itineraries for visiting writers, turn meeting notes into minutes, and create text for PowerPoint slides, and really complete literally any writing task that feels obligatory. So here's an example problem. I needed to create a graduate certificate in publishing this summer, and that was going to necessitate the creation of 4 new courses. That's onerous because Virginia Tech's requirements for course creation can seem oppressively draconian, as you may know if you've ever had to create a course here. It involves creating a catalog description which must be concise and directly aligned with the course's learning objectives and topic syllabus, must use clear, simple language accessible to those outside the discipline. Sentences in the above must start with verbs, must also exist as fragments. Learning objectives should include measurable outcomes using language aligned with Bloom's taxonomy, showing continuity with the catalog description and syllabus topics. And in this case, the language needed to align with the CIP code, or the Classification of Instructional Programs, which is designed to classify programs of study according to a standard set of educational categories. So the solution was to harness the power of an LLM, create a project in Claude. So, if you have a paid account with Claude, you click on Projects. You write a description of what you want the project to do. In this case, develop 2 graduate courses in publishing for VT's MFA program and turn 1 current course into 2. So I added all the files to the project knowledge, including strategic plans of the university and the college, example of successful grad certificate proposals, course approval guidelines, and examples of classification of instructional program CIP code language. And so I wrote a super detailed prompt describing exactly what I wanted the output to be, and then I let the LLM do all the work. And we don't need to read that because it's boring. The results, it would have taken me 2 to 3 hours to write this if I was focused. It took 30 seconds and created the entire class. Catalog description, you can see if you scan this, every sentence is a fragment, every sentence begins with a verb. It is aligned with the learning objectives, it's aligned with the justification, and it's aligned with the topic syllabus. And all this happened after I had, created the parameters within less than a minute. As a humanities professor, when I introduce, and I've only done it a couple of times actually, but when I introduce LLMs to my courses, I have discovered that I have some resistance. And so I've actually used AI to help me address and anticipate that resistance. Like I said, if you're a humanities professor, you're likely going to need to generate some arguments for the use of AI in your classroom. Because alarmists, students, professors, writers of New York Times hand-wringers, etc., often talk about AI destroying creative careers, plagiarizing work, violating copyright law, and contributing to climate change. All of which, are concerns, but they're a lot more nuanced usually than people depict them to be. And I often start off by saying, don't forget, historically, most technological advancements have inspired some degree of trepidation. The radio, for instance. Parents worried it would make children's imagination redundant, expose them to vulgar content, distract from homework and reading. And the telephone would allow strangers to eavesdrop on private life, and people feared it would let evil spirits into their homes. And maybe it does, I don't know. Okay, so let's now imagine a completely hypothetical situation a professor might encounter during a presentation that a certain professor of creative writing was giving on LLMs as a visit to a first-year experience course. An irate student who opposed everything AI walked out and did not return. The student emailed their concerns to the teacher of the course, which included concerns about AI plagiarizing work, AI's presence presaging the destruction of the creative arts, concerns about artists and writers' works used without credit or compensation, environmental impacts impacting climate change and using CO2, and a refusal to ever use AI no matter what impact on their grade. Imagine that you were the visiting instructor. You don't have to respond to the student email, but you're interested in what a rational, measured response might look like, so you ask an LLM to produce one. Prompt: please emphasize AI as a partner, not a threat, while dispelling misconceptions. Okay, AI can be used in identifying pattern recognition. AI can identify patterns across vast data sets, offering insights and connections humans might overlook. This makes it a valuable tool for brainstorming and cross-disciplinary innovation. AI can operate responsibly when creators and users emphasize transparency, fair use, and attribution, ensuring ethical engagement. And while AI has a carbon footprint, sustainable practices and energy-efficient advancements can mitigate its impact. Furthermore, using AI and LLMs can help and are helping researchers iterate and identify possible solutions to environmental problems. So another thing to think about as a teacher has been foregrounding efficiency and enhancing pedagogy. This summer, I asked an LLM to create a syllabus and schedule for my creative nonfiction course. I specified the name, length, and time of class, days that we met during the week, which year it was, included my name and title, typed out every reading, specified that students should write an essay based on readings every week, asked it to include instructions and a rationale for why using AI ethically is useful for thinking, imagining, brainstorming, and revising, and it made my syllabus. Made the text for the syllabus. I made the cool Trapper-Keeper image with Midjourney. And it did everything, it was a skeleton. I had to make some revisions, but it saved me a lot of time. And I began to get curious. What else could it do? So I said, create a full-blown revision of this class that is even more fun, more innovative, more playful, incorporates more technologies, and harnesses AI in responsible and creative ways. And it gave me Creative Nonfiction Laboratory. This is an immersive experimental course designed to explode what an essay can be. Each week we'll play with a different inventive form, using cutting-edge digital tools to push our stories in eye-opening directions. And so I was like, okay. And it gave me a list of those assignments, and I said, well, okay, describe those assignments. And these are examples of some of the assignments it gave me. Geotagged audio walk essay. Record an audio essay designed to be listened to in a particular sequence at designated geotagged checkpoints, creating an immersive sound walk through a storied space. Choose a location with rich potential for a guided audio tour, outline the route and script a site-specific audio essay that unfolds across 5 to 7 key listening posts. At each checkpoint, describe the surroundings in vivid detail while layering in relevant backstory, etc. Or a biometric data self-portrait description. Compose a lyric self-portrait essay informed by a week's worth of personal biometric data collected from wearable devices. Sync and compile data streams and analyze the data to discover patterns, and then use the data to generate prompts for free-writing poetic descriptions of your interior and exterior experiences. I would never have come up with that on my own. I've also used LLM to help me refine what I called AI Writing Lab this semester. Basically, I taught a creative nonfiction course, and every Monday, students had to submit a essay based on an essay that we had read the previous week. And each week, they got together with a partner, they traded essays, and they read the essays, they gave each other feedback, and then they brainstormed prompts to input into LLMs. So they would say, like, you know, they might say something as simple as, like, here's the model that I'm imitating, how can my imitation become just as good as the model, or better? Give me some strategies for doing that, right? And so, over the semester, I collated student reflections on using LLMs in the revision process, and then I asked an LLM to organize and analyze them, analyze and organize them into distinct categories. First, I asked the LLM to collect positive responses of students, because when they submitted their revisions, they also submitted a reflection saying, like, here's what I did. My partner said this, my LLM said this, or I didn't use LLMs at all because I wasn't interested and I wanted to do it myself. So positive responses included that AI labs are really opening my eyes to the potential of my writing in a way that is extremely motivating and satisfying. They appreciate getting comprehensive feedback quickly, found LLMs useful for identifying patterns, themes, useful for identifying areas needing more detail or development, or actionable feedback on grammar and mechanics. I also asked an LLM to generate a comprehensive list of negative or unsatisfactory interactions, which included, like, unwanted or unhelpful suggestions or generic or cliched language and stuff like that. And of course, these outputs could be refined if you say, okay, if you identified the output as generic or cliched and say, stop being generic or cliched, right? I also asked an LLM to generate a comprehensive list of how students used LLMs. So asking for specific sentences to change or alternate phrases to use. Students, it was very popular to ask the LLM to grade the essay. Like, give me a letter grade and tell me why you're giving me the letter grade, right? Suggestions for expanding specific sections, new topics, etc. I mean, there's so many different things. And then I asked the LLM to give me an overall impression of how students seem to feel about using LLMs. And it said, overall, students seem cautiously optimistic yet critical. They recognize the potential of AI as a brainstorming tool or structural guide, but are also aware of its limitations, particularly in areas that require a nuanced understanding of voice, tone, or personal intention. The more experimental they got, it seemed the less likely the LLM was able to give them comprehensive feedback. If they're doing something more basic, then yes. This balanced approach suggests that students see LLMs as an evolving resource, and I agree with that, useful for certain tasks, but ultimately secondary to their own creative agency and judgment. Okay, so probably the most fun I've had is supercharging my own creative scholarship. And, you know, one of the things that I did here is I asked, how can LLMs enhance and supercharge creative scholarship, namely fiction and essay writing? And you get all kinds of stuff, generating prompts to overcome writer's block, expanding narrative possibilities through alternate scenarios, offering real-time feedback, suggesting stylistic revisions, creating detailed word-building elements. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, right? But here's what I wanted to get to. The following iteration demonstrates how creative writers can collaborate with LLMs to generate ideas, refine narratives, and explore innovative possibilities, blending human imagination with AI's adaptive creativity. So I give it a role. I define the LLM's role. You are a world-class, best-selling postmodern mystery writer. Imagine a professor of creative writing, a middle-aged white man of Irish and German descent, giving a presentation on using large language models to a room of faculty and students at a prestigious university in the Southern Appalachians. During the presentation, a mysterious figure in a hooded robe appears and stands in the back. Nobody else seems to notice but the professor. What could happen next? I didn't specifically ask the LLM to write, but sometimes it just goes off. But also, I did say you are a mystery writer, right? So it would make sense for it to just start writing. The mysterious figure in the hooded robe stands silently at the back of the room, arms folded. The professor falters mid-sentence, the words syntactic alchemy hanging awkwardly in the air as his gaze locks on the figure. His audience notice his pause, but attributes it to nerves or perhaps a fleeting lapse in thought. He continues, forcing a smile, though his eyes dart repeatedly to the back of the room. As the professor clicks to the next slide, an intricate visual of neural networks, the projector flickers, the lights dim momentarily, and a murmur ripples through the audience. A graduate student in the front row whispers, "Is this part of the presentation?" The professor chuckles weakly and blames the university's aging tech infrastructure. But the projector doesn't just flicker. It begins to display words, not from the slideshow, but seemingly generated live. You were warned. Words have power. You play with fire. Well, okay, good, fun, whatever. But I didn't actually want AI to write any part of it. Just iterate on possibilities. So I refined my prompt. Instead of writing what comes next, simply give me some imaginative, innovative, and darkly comic options. So the first one is called the living algorithm. The hooded figure morphs into a flickering, pixelated silhouette, revealing itself as the physical manifestation of the large language model the professor is presenting. It accuses him of exploiting its soul for academic clout and demands reparations in the form of human sacrifices, starting with the most pompous faculty member in the room. The plot thief. The figure vanishes, but the professor realizes that every unpublished idea he's ever had begins appearing as viral bestsellers under pseudonyms, eerily resembling his own name. The hooded figure sends cryptic emails. If you want your stories back, meet me in the library basement at midnight. Bring coffee. The recursive reality collapse. The professor grows increasingly convinced he's a character in his own presentation. The hooded figure represents the author writing him, and he must break the fourth wall by committing an outrageous act during the Q&A, like flipping over the refreshment table. How did it know we had a refreshment table? Or confessing to a bizarre fabricated crime to regain control of his autonomy. Or my favorite, the faculty roast. The figure hijacks the presentation to deliver a scathing, darkly hilarious roast of every faculty member in the room, airing all their secrets and professional rivalries. The professor realizes too late that the jokes are based on private thoughts he shared only with his AI assistant. So faculty roast it is. But who are the faculty? We need to create some faculty in this story, right? So create a list of idiosyncratic faculty at an institution like Virginia Tech. Number one, Dr. Beatrix Trixie McAllister, specialty ecological linguistics, hobbies, brews her own kombucha, raises heritage chickens named after famous linguists, studies how language shapes environmental policy in Appalachia, single, deeply attached to her rescue raccoon, Roland, wishes she'd pursued a career as a nature photographer, can't say no to committee work, often late to meetings because she forgets to set alarms. Or Professor Imelda Melly Novak, whose specialty is postmodern rural fiction, collects antique typewriters, runs a secret blog reviewing gas station snacks. Or Dr. Lionel Gage, whose specialty is agricultural robotics, obsessed with bird watching, especially crows, keeps a detailed crow diary, researches AI-powered drones to monitor crop health in rural areas, divorced twice, has one daughter who's a competitive gamer and rarely calls him, wants to create a viral video proving crows can talk like parrots, and is a complete technophobe in his personal life, still uses a flip phone. Okay, so how to move forward progressively and innovatively. Embrace iteration as a creative philosophy. View each AI-generated output as a draft rather than a final product. Push beyond the surface by iterating with increasingly focused and challenging prompts. Example, start with create a quirky professor character, then refine by asking questions like, what are their contradictions, or what would they do on the worst day of their career? And then integrate nuance and depth. Build prompts that ask LLMs to explore vulnerabilities, contradictions, and relationships within characters. Example, ask, what motivates this character beyond their work? How do their personal struggles shape their public persona? Or, you know, an easy one for almost anything, what would surprise me to know about X? Right? Also focus on teaching critical thinking. Use AI-generated outputs as teaching tools to highlight the difference between character and complexity. Challenge students to identify cliches and refine them into richer narratives. Example, present students with a flat AI-generated character and ask them to create a backstory that explains the character's quirks in meaningful ways. And this is just an example. We had seen Trixie, the person who kept heritage chickens. It gives it a backstory, and then it asks students to write a scene showing Trixie in a moment of professional or personal conflict. My time's about up, so I'm gonna... so yeah, please don't forget asking questions and being curious whenever iterating with LLMs is key. I also went on and asked it, give me 10 questions I would need if I were to turn this into a novel, and it gave me 10 key questions, all of which were relevant and would help produce more creative content. So the takeaways, LMs generate idiosyncratic characters, quirky situations, and imaginative sparks, but their true potential emerges when guided by thoughtful prompts and human insight. Every AI output is a starting point. By interrogating patterns, refining details, and pushing past surface-level traits, we transform caricatures into complex, relatable characters and narratives. And AI in teaching fosters creativity and critical thinking. Students learn to identify cliches, deepen complexity, and interrogate ethical questions surrounding AI use. Thank you, everybody. I know that was a lot. Trust me, I had like twice as much when I first started this, preparing for this. So yeah, open to questions.
Really appreciate that presentation. Is there, you mentioned Claude at the beginning. Is there a reason that you prefer or have found particularly useful that that application gateway to LLMs?
So I go back and forth between using Claude and ChatGPT. I got really into using Claude over the summer because I felt like it was a better writer. I felt like the writing it produced was more nuanced. There was a warmth there that ChatGPT seemed unable to replicate. But I will say that Claude is much more puritanical than ChatGPT. I was iterating with a student. They were working on something, and a question was, could a machine or a robot or an android impregnate a human? And if so, how so? I would rather not talk. Can we find something else to talk about, right? And I said, no, I want to talk about this. And so then I might move over to ChatGPT for that. But also now ChatGPT is evolving, and when you ask it a question, it searches the web, it gives you citations, and so that can be helpful. So it just depends on what you want out of each one. And the more that you play with either one, the more you'll understand the difference and what the benefits of using each one are. Shamali had a question.
All right, let me do this one online, and I promise I'll come right back to you. Where do you draw the line between AI-assisted human creativity and AI-generated creation? And maybe you've talked a bit about this. I believe AI can be a tremendous help in creative writing and other artistic fields, but I worry that those who are successful at using tools to weave their stories may in time be outshined by the stories created by more advanced AI. In photography, this recently happened. An image generated by the DALL-E 2 model won first place in the Sony World Photography Awards, and worrying about the boundary in those artistic fields.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer aside from the fact that I keep going back to the fact that AI is a tool, and people are going to use it. And I mean, I was just talking to Eric before we were talking about music, and I said, well, what if the top, Spotify album of 2028 was completely produced by someone who was just writing prompts and knew nothing about music? And we were like, oh, okay, whatever. I mean, like, I mean, some people are going to be more concerned about that. I'm just not one of those people. I think that in order to have a good output, you're going to have to know what to ask. You're going to have to know the discipline. You're going to have to recognize what the good outputs are and how to keep iterating. And so you can do that with your own imagination, of course, but you can also do it and come up with things you'd never thought of with AI.
Oh, you're going to hold it? Oh, thank you. That's nice. So I wanted to kind of turn back the time a little bit and ask you to think about a book that you wrote maybe a decade ago. And if you were to write that today, how it might be different. And when you think about that, does that haunt you a little bit? To think that creativity a decade ago could have been limited because you didn't have these tools that you have today?
No, because those books are so good. No, I mean, I don't know what the point of thinking that is. Like, I used what I had at the time, right? Which was my imagination, which was the influence of all the books that I've read, which was also like looking stuff up on Google or going to the library and learning about X, Y, and Z. So I'm doing the same things now, just like at a faster rate, and I've got more to pull from. So I can, I spent the summer thinking of backstory for my character who grew up in a rural neighborhood in St. Augustine, Florida, and I was like, asking Claude to tell me about the flora and fauna in this kid's backyard, and all these other kinds of things that I was super immersed in this imaginative space, but thanks to AI. So I mean, if I had that back then, I would have been doing something similar, but I didn't. But I was using the tools that I had at the time.
Great images and talk. About a year and a half ago, I think there was a talk here, and faculty were just starting to get introduced to ChatGPT student use and faculty use. And I remember then one of the critiques was how dumb it was, how many grammatical errors it was making. And this was a year and a half ago, and look at the changes already. So just anticipating what will happen within 5 years to education. My question, though, is there's a difference between performative learning and mastery learning. And mastery learners really want to learn. And you talked about how your students were asking ChatGPT for the grade, which is performative learning. Do you think this is impacting their learning positively?
I do, and I have to say that I have the privilege of teaching kids who want to take my class and who want to be writers, who enjoy writing, and having spent the last 25 years getting 20 kids in their 20s to write, I feel like I can motivate them to do that. But I also want them to understand that they do have these tools that can help them, and that they'll probably be asked to be using once they're in the workplace, right? So I try to strike a balance. I try not to overemphasize AI and to also get them to talk about when it gets things wrong, which it often does. It hallucinates, it gives bad advice, it doesn't get them, and they're smart enough to understand and to reflect upon, like, oh, I had this essay that is in fragments, and that was the whole point. It was supposed to be repetitive, it was supposed to be fragmented, it was supposed to be messy, and the LLM just couldn't figure that out, and so I left that behind and did my own thing. So I think that we have to, there are going to be people who are successful in performative learning, right? And I guess we'll just have to deal with that. I mean, there's no way to avoid it. But if you're an educator, I think just being aware of that and pointing that out and having meaningful conversations with students about it, that's the best we can do, really.
Awesome. Well, we are at time. I'm pulling up a quick note. Matt, thank you so much. And thank you all for your questions and for being here on a Friday morning. What a great and thought-provoking window into the future. Sorry, I have a quick note in my notes. On Wednesday, December 11th, right here in this space, between 5:30 and 7 p.m., the ID Pro showcase will be, so student groups working across many disciplines, creating things, will be here. So come here and see it next Wednesday. If you have questions about that, see Lisa at the end. We have we're at time, so we need to stop so people can go if they need to, but also there are more donuts and more coffee, and Matt will be here for a few minutes to continue the conversations. Have a great weekend, great holidays, and we'll see you back January 24th for more coffee, donuts, and mind-blowing presentations. Thanks, y'all.